Aha. But yeah, one day over 100 is really, really abnormal for a full year in Texas. But Texas, due to where it is in the jet stream, is supposed to get like wetter and nicer. Aha. But yeah, one day over 100 is really, really abnormal for a full year in Texas.
Am I having a stroke? What's going on?
I apparently when you start streaming, it immediately goes and to the view thing. Okay, we should be live. Yes, we are live.
Okay.
So hey everybody, it's what, August 20th, and this is the Loaders Working Group meeting. We're have a very light agenda this time, just about trying to merge in the big consolidation PR. So yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
Cool.
Jeffrey isn't here, but he has messaged the Slack channel and myself, and he's got comments on the PR with his opinions. So Jacob, I think both Jeff and my opinion is we should move forward with it. Just do one last round after we get those nits fixed up and then land it. I know that we're going to see some backlash whenever we change an API. We already have like a lot of warnings if you use this API, but we're going to get backlash. But it'll be good to see what backlash we get.
Okay.
In case we missed anything on the PR. So that's expected. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I would hope it wouldn't be too controversial. But in terms of like getting it merged?
Yes. Is there anything
we
need to do?
I don't think so. Well, I've got the nits from you, and I think there was one from Jeffrey that came in yesterday, I think. So yeah, get those up. It's pretty well tested at this point, I think. We've got the one known like incompatibility thing, but aside from that, I think we have found all of the nooks and crannies there can be. So aside from a bit of polish, I think we're good to go.
So the incompatibility thing, are you talking about how people have to upgrade their loaders? Or is that
no,
a different one?
The CommonJS, the namespace CommonJS exports stuff.
That's working as intended, as much as we all hate it. It is.
Well, sure. Yeah, I'm not saying it should. Just saying, like, if you try to do this, it doesn't work.
Yeah, but that's true in the current loaders. That's true with the current loaders before this factor. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So nothing additional is like broken because of this. Just like it might be unexpected, that particular aspect. So I added some extra notes to the ESM docs to say, like, if you try to do this like very specific thing, know that never worked.
I think, let me double check. In the consolidation PR, I know we have messages if you have the deprecated hooks, but those don't show up if you have the modern import hook, right? The load hook, sorry.
Which deprecation warning? There's a few.
So if you like put get format or get preload, get global preload code.
Yes.
I know we send messages that you need to update your API, but those don't show up if you have load, right?
I think they do. Like, so if you export any deprecated hooks, it will give you a deprecation warning for the hook, that the deprecated hook that you have exported.
But it still continues to function, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So like it figures out what you were trying to do. and then it does that and then tells you like, hey, update your stuff too.
Yeah.
This will work for now.
Yeah. Do we have any plans on when we're going to completely remove stuff for them? Because I know as long as it works still, it should be able to be backported. I don't want to backport this PR. I think it's too big.
Uh,
In
I don't know.
particular, because it's kind of a breaking PR.
I don't think there was any plan in place for how long the deprecation warning should be there and how long we should support the old hooks, because they were always experimental. So that it doesn't fall under the standard policy. And I think there was no original like mandate to add the deprecation warnings. I just added them in as I was going and was like, this would probably be nice to let people know.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We already have warnings, so it's not like we're in a case where we're adding warnings where there were none before. Because that is actually considered a problem for breaking changes. Because some people rely on there not being any warnings.
Okay.
So as long as we already have warnings in place, it should be good. Other than that, I think we're good to go on this PR. And then we did have some messages in Slack. I think you were starting to read those from yesterday.
Yes. Oh, Jeffrey's here.
Oh, I need to actually. How do I do this? Promote. Allowed to talk. Oh, are those separate? Interesting. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi.
Hello. Is it truly you? Is it some anon who's used your name?
I wouldn't forget Jeffrey.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, it's yeah, I find it very confusing too, but apparently what you're supposed to do is the promote to panelist, and then I think that automatically makes them allowed to talk. So thank you
Yep.
for stepping in, Bradley. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I can do this now. There are other meetings that
Yes.
should be running, and I've managed to avoid.
You've been avoiding them by saying that you don't know how to do it.
I've been avoiding by a little bit of saying I don't know how to do it, and a little bit of waiting on, various agreement from the people who have permissions to this, and not pushing hard to get permissions myself.
So yeah, I joined right when you were saying I think this PR is good to go, and I think I agree with
there's
that.
some
So
preface. I think
was there a but before that or something?
Yeah, we have to fix up the nits, and then we have to do a final run against the loaders example repo.
Yeah, that's what I had. I think I said earlier. But yeah, I was saying that I was going to do that. Yeah, Jacob, if you want to ping me as soon as all of the nits are resolved. I'm hoping I can do this weekend, but I feel like it's famous last words. I promise I want to do it really soon. Is as soon as you tell me that the branch is fixed, I'll pull it down on my local build node. I'll pull down the latest of that example repo, and then just make sure that, at least on my machine, just as kind of a double check. I'm sure you've done it on your machine. Just that the examples work on my machine as well, and then assuming it does, then it should be done, and I can I'll approve the PR, and then I'll go through I'll have to look up the steps because it's been a while, but I'll go through all the steps to actually land it.
Cool.
And one thing I was going to ask you is I know we obviously we're going back and forth a lot about the CoffeeScript loader in the example repo. What about the HTTPS loader?
That
one
fine.
It
that
just
was crazy simple.
It didn't need any updates.
It was like just change the name of the hooks, basically.
Did you do that as part of the
Yeah.
same PR? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to be clear, the CoffeeScript loader appears to be broken in our current loaders as well, if you're using that common JS thing, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
just
something I
wanna-
mentioned in the PR discussion when he was fixing it. I was like, oh, by the way, I should have put a big comment here that returning format common JS is just like never worked. And I asked him to add a comment about that so
Oh,
that
I think
yeah.
I did.
going forward, yeah, I think you did.
Yeah,
I mean, you can double check, but
There are very few cases where you actually want to return that, unfortunately.
well, I
Um,
think actually the CoffeeScript loader and probably the TypeScript loader, if someone writes one, would be those cases where it's like, in a project that's written in either of those languages, you might have a mix of files with import statements and files with require statements. And
I'm not arguing that. I think it would be lovely if common JS's existing API allowed us to integrate against it. Unfortunately, just the design of require.extensions is the problem. Like,
yeah,
it uses first class values, so there's nothing really you can do. And it uses file names, not source strings. So you can't even pass like source text to the common JS loader. It doesn't work that way.
I mean, I feel like it's, to your point, I think it's probably an edge case. I feel like it's enough of an edge case that we should at least document it, because it is part of the API that you can return format common JS. So it's like, it's not unrealistic to think that someone might write a loader,
Yeah.
doing what we say they can do in the docs, right? So if it doesn't work, then that should at least be mentioned in the docs.
So
And maybe we
one
never
thing-
fix it, but I think we at least need to document it.
Yeah, I
one thing
added it
we
to the
could
docs.
one thing we could do is give warnings or errors if you return source text and format common JS. Maybe that would be.
Sure. I mean, I kind of feel like this is like an edge case that we can like almost like bump to the end. You know what I mean? Like, let's implement chaining first and like, get the important things that are on our roadmap done, and at least make a mention of this in the docs, like, for now. And then we can loop back to this and be like, okay, what are the aside from just documenting that it's broken, what are the various options that we have? Like, yeah, adding warnings. Is there a way to make it work? Etc. And we can, kind of tackle that as its own thing. Like, the thing I'm thinking is like, the way that this might become more important than just like random edge case is like, say the instrumentation use case, whatever, New Relic, I think was the company that was on a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So like, say you have an ESM entry point and it has obviously lots of imports, and some of those imports are for common JS dependencies. Like, that's certainly going to be the case for every app for the near future. It's going to be a while before everyone has, no common JS dependencies anywhere in their application tree. So presumably the instrumentation library doesn't want to just implement like first party application code. I assume it wants to implement the entire app, including their, third party dependencies. And so if that's the case, well, then it's going to need to support, like, sometimes those import statements are going to be importing common JS files. And so then this is not really so much of an edge case. It's kind of, becomes quite prominent all of a sudden, because you can't really instrument the whole app until we solve this. Or am I missing something?
I think what we could do is show people what they most likely want to do with examples, but we should talk to somebody about that.
Well,
You
am I
generally-
correct though in my statement of the problem? Like,
You're absolutely correct, and I'm just trying to think of ways
Okay.
we can take action on the problem.
Yeah.
Because there isn't much we can actually do. There's some we can do if we move loaders off thread. There's some we could do if we expose the named exports detection API. But all of these just aren't really things that people want to do. What they really want to do is just know, like, if I do this, will I suddenly and magically be able to make a wrapper module around a common JS module, like the format common JS that you would return from a loader? Because you almost never want to return format common JS. You almost always want to return type module or format module, and just show them what that wrapper would look like. We have a really old example for that, and we could just merge it into the docs, update it and merge it into the docs. Because basically what you have to do is return a format module that does
It just
internally.
wraps it like it.
Yeah,
It imports create. It uses create require to get a require, and then it requires the file or something like that.
yeah, but the problem there is you don't know the actual export names of the common JS thing. This is like the perpetual problem with ESM. And so at that point, you have to like expose somehow the named exports of a module to loaders, which we can do. I just think it's not going to be fun.
Well, I think the thing is like if the ultimate use case is instrumentation, the problem there is that it's like kind of by definition, it needs to support anything, like they're not going to know anything about the dependencies of the app. So they need to really be able to handle like 100% of whatever's out there in terms of common JS dependencies that could potentially be, unless they just throw, like maybe that could be the first pass of this is like, if there's a common JS dependency anywhere in your tree, we throw in her, and that could be like the first version to just get something out the door. And then the question would be like, how do we, get rid of the error so that it actually works or something like that,
I feel like we'll get lots of people flipping tables if we start throwing.
So we don't
Maybe.
have to throw. It's just like, you don't have to throw. It's just,
I mean, it would also accelerate the whole transition to ESM, like there might be some.
Our goal is to allow people to use both, because
I know.
we won't get 100% ESM coverage. There's like a whole Twitter flame war today about this. But no, what we need to do is like just keep moving forward with this PR, get it done, and then we have to reevaluate some stuff for them. In particular, how you can intercept common JS. There's like multiple ways we can do it. They're all gross.
I mean, I feel like there's other solutions that we're not discussing. Like someone mentioned combining the common JS and ESM loaders. Maybe that's a little too radical, but like,
so like that's honestly the lowest breakage, sadly.
Or maybe that's not too radical. I mean, what I was about to say was like, inject these loader hooks inside require.extensions, like wherever, like right now you add a function to require.extensions like .js, right, to register your own loader for .js files, say, or whatever extension you want.
And we can add parameters to that evil function that you put in there.
Well, that's an option, but anyway, I'm just saying like Node does something with that function. Like there's some chunk of code somewhere in Node that runs your registered function at some point, and wherever Node runs that callback that you've registered, it could also run, the resolve hook or something. I don't know. Like that's, I'm just thinking like maybe we could kind of integrate the ESM loader hooks into require.extension somehow.
Well, no, part of the problem was that in the CoffeeScript loader, it has a require extensions and it runs and it does what it's supposed to do. And then after it's done, after it's finished, whatever it has done just like disappears.
Kind of. So it does stuff, but the problem is it's not. The CoffeeScript loader can't provide source text. It has to go through requires existing APIs, because like otherwise the world breaks.
Right.
So what Jeffrey's describing is like we allow it to integrate using those existing APIs. So right now, the function signature for require extensions is roughly given a file path, not a URL, return a function
Okay.
that returns the module exports.
That's
So
what
return,
currently happens, or that's what he's proposing?
yeah, that is the current API design. It's pretty
Okay.
wild. There's nothing about formats. There's nothing about source text. There's just like no way for you to like provide a way to instrument it. But if we change that API to be like, here's a file path, and if you return a function, it does one thing. We could alter it to either have more parameters, so it's file path, and these are loader hook parameters. We could change the return value to be polymorphic. So if you return a function or if you return an object, do two different things. So then it could be like, oh, I actually do have, a way to get the source text of things. But that's basically what Jeffrey is talking about. We have to like figure out a way to get require extensions to be able to move forward. This is,
I mean, or we just create some new API, because like require.extensions, I feel like if you look it up in the docs, it said it was deprecated in like Node
9 years
0.8 or
ago.
something. Yeah, exactly. Like it's been so long deprecated and so overdue to be
So-
removed that like we can
we
we don't even
never
necessarily need to
ever
remove it.
remove
We could
that.
just like we could just create something else.
We had a problem with people running apps in TypeScript, and there was a PR this week about require extension support not working and it breaking their TypeScript stuff. Like you have to support
They
this
effed up.
No, like literally, like this is a really bad problem that was discovered as people start using worker threads with TypeScript, because worker threads were not going through require.extensions on their entry points. And so TypeScript entry points to worker threads using the standard way you get TypeScript running in Node no longer work. This would also be true for the hyphen required CoffeeScript /register. You can't run .coffee files. And like that's
might
actually
be a while before someone reports a bug for the CoffeeScript version of the same thing. But yes. I mean, this could be an opportunity that like, okay, that's the time has finally come. Get rid of require.extensions, replace it with a new API.
we can do that.
And then maybe the new API is this one, is the ESM loader hooks, right? Because like,
sure,
wouldn't this support everything that people are using require.extensions for?
It should, but we have to provide an upgrade path. So like a good example is this consolidation PR. You can write a loader that works both in the consolidated form and the legacy form. It still runs. You get more warnings now, but they both you can ship one file that runs on the old version without the consolidated form and one that runs on the new version with the consolidated form.
I don't really feel like that's a design goal though, because it's like,
it's
so
not.
experimental and it's had so many warnings that this API will change that I feel like trying to maintain backward compatibility with the earlier.
No, we're going to rip out that backward compatibility, but we have to provide a path for them to actually upgrade.
Okay.
And then we're going to rip it out. We've done this before where we've ripped out a few return types on these loader hooks and things like that. But if there's no way to upgrade, I mean, a wholesale upgrade is unrealistic unless we provide some way for them to dynamically at runtime select which way they're gonna patch the
Well,
hook.
I feel like it's as simple as like, which version of Node the newer API shipped in, and you could just like branch on the version of Node. Like it's not like you need to feature detect something like this. This is like literally tied to the version of Node, of what the API is.
This is true. And with global preload code, you can ship require extension polyfills inside loaders. So I'm fine with that approach. We just have to like be super clear on like, if you are using require extensions, this is how you upgrade. Even if it's just docs,
Well,
a blog
sure,
post, I
okay.
don't care.
Well, let's step back for a second. First, we need to solve the problem between ourselves of like what we think we're
Yeah.
replacing required extensions with, or how we're extending required extensions, or whatever it is. We need to figure out what we want to propose, and then we can figure out the communication strategy and upgrade strategy. But stepping back for a second, can we implement the rest of the loaders to-do list first and solve this problem at the end? Like, can we implement chaining and whatever the other thing was after chaining, and then kind of loop back to this whole, so now how do we deal with the Tom.js part of it?
The only thing we have to do in addition to our current stuff is we have to move the loaders, unfortunately, off thread. We've known this for a long time. If
We have
you
to move
want
them
to
off thread?
off the main thread. To instrument CommonJS, you have to move the loader hook off the main thread.
Well, okay, but could we basically do a next steps like this, where like, we land the current PR, then we do a PR that all it does is add chaining to this PR, and that in itself
Yeah.
would be complicated.
Yeah. All of our existing path forward is correct. You can just
Okay.
keep doing what we planned.
All right, so
It's
so
just-
chaining, and then the next thing could be, move it off thread, and then after that we can, yes, and hopefully we can do this as a series of smaller PRs, so that we don't have what we just went through of like a PR that's just
Yes.
open for weeks.
Yeah, so moving off thread will be a largish PR. It won't be tiny.
Okay. Well, all the more
Um,
reason then to do it without trying to tack on chaining or something else big onto
No,
the same
but it
thing.
can be done piecemeal as these completely discrete steps like you described. Moving it off thread, I think the only outstanding thing is there's another PR that's already up that just adds a synchronous communications channel so that loaders can actually communicate without using globals with the application code. But we already have a PR for up for that. And then, yeah, so we're pretty prepped to go. Changing the API signatures of hooks doesn't matter for moving stuff off thread. Adding more chaining doesn't matter for moving stuff off. Well, there's a slight thing about chaining, moving off thread. We have some very old designs about off thread stuff and about parallelism off thread stuff, which we can get to when we get to.
Now, so I haven't used worker threads that much. I've used them in a browser a few times, but I've never used a worker thread in Node. So I'm not that familiar with what it entails. So I guess question one is, when you say move it off thread, you mean using like new worker as the API, or is it a different API? And then question two is like, what would this look like in practice?
In practice, most loaders won't change how they look. It just means that instead of blocking the main thread, you actually run in the background, essentially. The big things that'll change are if you mutate the globals in your loader, it won't mutate the globals for your application. Like that's it. That's the big thing.
I feel like we could document that.
I mean,
and that should be enough, because like not many people are going to be writing loaders, like the people who like the TypeScript developers and like I feel like there's only going to be a few dozen loaders ever written that are going to be popular,
probably
TypeScript, instrumentation libraries, etc. But that's it.
Outside of I mean, there aren't anybody who really is wanting to mutate the globals. They mutate the globals because that's their only communications channel right now. So none of the existing stuff, I believe, should be affected because Jest doesn't use loaders. They like completely recreated ESM in user space.
What
So I think-
happens when what happens when then someone does want to, like, for instance, if you want to mock some global, you just can't?
So that's where the communications channel comes in. If you really want to get into it, there's a PR about it in the ESM channel in Slack. Basically, you can send messages between the threads.
Well,
but, like,
how
if you
many
wanna-
threads would there be?
So
Like,
it
why wouldn't there
depends.
just be one?
We had disagreement in the modules working group about how many threads there would be. Some people wanted a single shared thread for all loaders. Others wanted a thread per loader. But there was general consensus that if we move loaders off thread, all the threads for Node, all of them, would only need one thread per loader. So if you had, like, your application spins up 8 workers, they only need one loader. Currently, we spin up 8 loaders.
Okay.
That would no longer be necessary.
Why would it?
I feel like once we have chaining, we would kind of like my instinct would be we'd want only one thread to have all the loaders in, because, or are you saying
Yeah.
like one, like
Let
a
me pull up
new
some ancient-
instantiation of loaders for each worker thread in application code?
So currently we spin up a new loader per thread. There can only be
Okay.
one loader in each thread. What was this called?
I would think it would just get really complicated to have like one worker per loader. Because like if they could communicate with each other, but that seems like, I don't know, a
Well,
trapeze
yeah,
artist balancing.
when the loaders are chained, it's like they need to pass objects to each other, because that's how chaining works. So it feels like they all, I mean, my instinct, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. It's not like I'm saying it has to be this way or anything, but my instinct is that all the whole loader chain should be together in one thread.
Yeah.
Now,
Well,
if you need to
so-
reproduce that per each worker thread that user code creates, then that I can see why that would need to happen.
So
But
we're gonna open up slides from 2016.
oh god,
Holy crap.
I thought ESM didn't exist back then.
We started this journey in 2014. So loader thread investigation.
I wasn't born yet.
So this is roughly what the naive thought is. If you move workers off thread, you have to send data serialized to the thread, whatever that data is. Here at this time, it's refer specifier data. There's now conditions, a few other things. So what happens if you have multiple loaders? One of the idea was you have multiple threads, one for each loader. So this means that multiple loaders, if they take a lot of CPU time, they don't cause head of line blocking. So if you have 2 big AST transforms, you can actually go and have a single like communication that doesn't block either. So if you have 2 very compute heavy loaders, for whatever reason, multiple code transforms, don't really care, they can do it in parallel.
Yeah, I can see the benefit of that, but
Okay.
that seems like more of an edge case than it's probably worth the complication.
So it's not a significant difference from just moving them off thread. Once you have a single one off thread, you have to enable serialization between loaders. So the bigger problem is going to be things like this, where you have many and they start short circuiting. So currently,
Yeah.
when you spin up a worker thread in Node, you can dynamically specify which loaders get loaded. So you can actually encounter a case where you're always short circuited because you have dropped one of the loaders. Say you have a worker thread that doesn't want to do some kind of code coverage transformation. This means that if all the worker threads, if all of the loaders are in a single thread, you now have to track which loaders you invoke for any given worker. So that worker that is missing the top loader here, when it serializes to the first loader, it could be all the loaders in that thread in a single thread. When it serializes data there, it has to know not to use the code coverage loader.
All right.
So in either case,
Okay.
we're in a horrifying complexity land.
All right. How about this? It sounds to me like we can implement chaining next, and we don't have to tackle any of the thread or worker thread stuff, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So let's do that. If that's okay with you.
That.
And
Cross this
then
bridge when we come
I don't
to
know
it.
if this is the next thing after that, or if there's something else before this, but
Please
yes,
let
we
this be
can-
the very last thing we ever do. It's
all right.
It's really like the API diff on this for actual writers of loaders is almost nothing. There should be virtually no cases except you're mutating the globals that this is visibly different. It's just the piping to serialized data is significant.
Okay.
Hmm.
Well, and the
Maybe
other thing
I'm
is we
going
have
on
to
holiday
solve
that time.
this. We have to solve this for CommonJS too, you're saying, because like required.extensions doesn't apply to worker threads. So
So we
oh yes, it does.
oh gosh, required.extensions does not propagate across worker threads, which is problematic. I don't want to open that other window. Where is
Oh,
it?
so you're saying that like if each new thread re-registered with required.extensions, then it would work?
Yes. Currently, loaders do automatically propagate, unlike require extensions. That's partially because the API design of required.extensions. So we have
All right,
something
I
that
shouldn't
came
have
out right
asked.
after this. So this is basically explaining it. Unfortunately, when you get require extensions or just the common JS stuff in general, by default, it would have to call back to the main thread. And this is why it has to be moved off thread, because you can't do IO or other things, a variety of operations on the main thread synchronously. So a loader would essentially shell out to the main thread, call its required.extensions by default, do some stuff, and then return back to the loader thread with the results.
Okay.
This is horrendous. It's really bad, but it works. So
it seems fairly straightforward, like the bit that you've just described right now. That seems fairly straightforward.
It's fairly straightforward, but it causes problems because, like we said, required.extensions does not actually propagate automatically. So you have loaders that need to ensure that they install the required.extensions in global preload code and things like that. If we want to completely drop require extensions, I'm all for it. Because this could intercept it. This could intercept it before we ever get to require extensions. But if it calls the default loader hooks, it would go back through this round trip nightmare.
Let's postpone this. I mean, I feel like I'm also open to the concept of finally like Node 17 or Node 18, whatever, literally does not have required.extensions anymore. But we have to, I think, have at that point the new loaders API would need to be complete. It would need to be non-experimental, and it would need to apply to CommonJS.
Yeah.
But if we can do all that, then sure, this is like a way better replacement for required.extensions, and it obviously then would apply to CommonJS and ESM. So I feel like this is a huge upgrade from something we deprecated 9 years ago.
So we can do it, but like no matter what we do, the point is like having loaders on a single thread where you have like 10 loaders on a single thread versus 10 threads with 10 different loaders. That's not the complexity.
Well, and then if the actual application code spawns 4 worker threads, then now you've got, 50 threads just for loaders, and it seems a little much.
No, they
but-
would always share. So
Okay.
this is similar to something on the web. So if you've ever used shared worker, I
Mhm.
think it's shared web workers.
Yes.
These aren't just enabled everywhere, but essentially for a given URL across your entire browser, or in our case, a node process, it would always refer to the same instance. And this is where having all the loaders in a single thread really goes bad. Where if you have like 50 loaders, let's say, per thread, like things would be bad. So you want to instead be like, okay, this thread, our application thread, our main thread, has these 3 URLs for its loaders. And so when you create a request, you look up your shared loader, like cache, and it sends messages out to those 3 loaders. If they're all on the same thread, things get a little weird. If they're all on different threads, I mean, it's just sending the messages like normal.
But how do they enforce sequence? Or does
You
the
have
main
to,
thing?
when you send the payload to the threads for workers, you encode the total list of the loader chain. So if we have HTTPS loader, CoffeeScript loader, and then default, you would, when you make an import, it would be like, hey, I'm running this hook. It's got an array or something, an ordered list of HTTPS loader, CoffeeScript loader, default.
But if each loader is in a different worker, only the particular loader that's in that worker needs to be aware of itself, right? So then it just needs to know the next one to call, like a linked list.
Unfortunately, not all threads have the same list of loaders.
What? Why?
Because that's how worker threads work. Worker threads work as if they're entirely new node processes. You can configure your list of loaders when you create new worker in Node.
Right, but I feel like here's the situation though. Like I feel like the default should be that it should inherit the list of loaders from the parent thread, because otherwise it's like,
That
imagine
is the default, yes.
Okay, good. Because I'm just imagining, like, say you have a npm dependency and the npm dependency calls new worker. It's not going to know what the workers were that the consuming application might have registered. So,
Yep.
Okay. But yeah, if that's the default, then I think that's fine.
So the only problem with Jacob's thing is like you can have multiple of these linked lists, essentially. There's not a single one for the whole node process. We could try to mandate that there's only ever a single one for the node process and remove the ability of worker threads to dynamically configure their loader list. I'm okay with that. Meh.
Anyway, all right. So
Yeah.
we'll land this one. Chaining. Jacob, are you up for taking on chaining once we get this one landed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is there any questions you have about that one, or do you feel like you already know? Well, I guess the big question we have to decide is the 2 proposed designs.
Right.
We need to resolve that.
And actually, sorry, before we move on to that, I was just looking through the pull request, and what I said earlier is not entirely true. The change that we've made to the loaders API is not fully backwards compatible. Some loaders, some hooks whose names have changed, it will issue a warning, and then just assign the hook of the old name to the new name. But if like the hook has changed, so for instance,
So if we
Uh,
change the API signature of any of them, we probably shouldn't auto upgrade.
I think the only one that we could auto assign would be global preload, because that one is like, we just
That's what we
rename
do.
it, but that's it. But all
Yeah,
the
that's what it
others, I
does.
feel like, are not really equivalent.
Yeah. So like what we could do is there's get source, get transform or something. And like we could create a wrapper and just like, if you supply a get source and if you supply a transform source, run get source first, feed that into transform source. But I feel like maybe
No,
more trouble.
let's not
Yeah.
add stuff to make a backward compatibility transition path easier. Like, we need to be able to quickly iterate on this thing to get it to the end.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm not that concerned about people, the handful of people that have written experimental loaders based on this can just update them. I don't,
Yeah.
no one's using this in production.
We should totally just let them upgrade on their own. Just give them warnings, make sure that you could theoretically run a loader with both the sets of hooks, and that's it.
Well,
Like,
if you supply, currently it won't do that. Like if you supply.
To be clear, I mean, on two different versions of Node, one with the PR and one without the PR, you can write a single source text that runs on both.
Oh, yeah,
we
that'll
don't
work.
have to. We don't have to make it run on both.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay. Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay. All right. Well, we're just about out of time, so we shouldn't dive into the whole which API for chaining do we want, but do we want to at least have a plan for resolving that? I mean, we could just wait until the next meeting and talk about it then, devote the whole meeting to it. But if you wanted to start working on the chaining before then, we should talk about that before then.
I think the return type, I'm still unclear how it's going to work with a variety of workflows. So I still need to see the API examples if we want to go forward with that.
Okay.
All right. Well, so maybe you could do that before the next meeting. And if it feels like, you're ready to go and we need to just have this discussion, maybe we can have like an impromptu meeting like next Friday or something to try to settle down what do we want this design to look like. And then you can get going. But if it sounds like we're having productive conversations in GitHub, going back and forth on the thread or wherever you have the design posted, then we could just do that and then hopefully use the next meeting to like, make a decision. I feel like, Jacob, you're the one implementing this, so it should really, like, I really kind of feel like I should defer to you. But I would like for us to try to reach a consensus decision if we can. So.
Okay, cool. Just the implementation of the return one seems like it would be significantly easier. For the other one, I've thought about it casually a couple times, and I actually can't think of how to implement it. So if we did settle on that one,
other one meaning like the
current
API that we kind of currently have?
No, sorry, we're like one feeds into the other.
I'm thinking of like the next versus done
yes,
designs. Yeah. Which one are you saying like you can't think about how to implement it?
The next one, the one that's not mine.
But that's the one we have now. How is that hard to implement?
I can't remember. Sorry.
Well, all right. We don't have to dig into it now. I mean, maybe let's just land the first PR, and yeah, we can start thinking about it and figure out a way to make this decision. And hopefully, let's try to make the decision no later than next meeting, if that works for everybody. And that way, sure. And if we can make it sooner, then great. And then Jacob is unblocked, and he can get going.
Cool.
Does that sound good, Bradley?
Yep. Also, I want to say, don't think about the implementation nightmare that's threaded loaders. Like, it's been solved. We've had like 3 PRs that we've only been blocked on performance reasons for in the past. So like implementing the nightmare has happened multiple times successfully.
I mean, if it's blocked on performance
Different
reasons,
people.
I feel like if we can somehow make the performance hit not happen unless they use the -- loader flag, that would
So-
seem to solve the problem. Because like by definition, if you're using loaders, you're slowing down Node. Like,
Correct.
you know.
So the argument was spinning up a thread even with a flag was too prohibitive at the time.
We can have that debate again.
Yeah.
I mean, the alternative is like
things have
never
changed.
shipping instrumentation for ESM, which means no one can use ESM for like, like any big company production website. Like I can't ship a website in production that doesn't support instrumentation at my job. So that just means I can't use ESM at work. And that's like a no-go. Like, we have to be able to support it even if there's a performance hit, So,
Yes, I think the people who largely pushed back have moved on.
right. So let's worry about it if it happens, I guess.
Cool.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to get bumped in a second when the new meeting comes in, but thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate all your work. I will try to get this landed in the next few days. So yeah, let me know when you've resolved the nits and I'll check it out.
Okay, cool. I shall do. I'll aim to get it done tonight because I think they're quite simple. It's like
yes,
prototype
so
equals null type thing. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll try to get that done tonight. If not, then probably Sunday.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.